Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You know, nobody wants to abuse their child. All of us have got bad days or days when it's just difficult to deal with the energy and the behavior of a young child. And they can be annoying sometimes, but abuse is never justified. Children are our trust from Allah. I want to read to you a poem that is about a kind of ordinary occurrence in people's lives, and I want to reflect with you a little bit about it. This poem is by a woman named Sharon Olds, and I think what's significant about it is not only that she's a really excellent wordsmith, but that she captures a nuanced moment that probably many of us can relate to. This poem is called The Clasp.
The Clasp. She was 4, he was 1. It was raining. We had colds. We had been in the apartment 2 weeks straight. I grabbed her to keep her from shoving him over on his face again, and when I had her wrist in my grasp, I compressed it fiercely for a couple of seconds to make an impression on her, to hurt her, our beloved firstborn. I even almost savored the stinging sensation of that squeezing. The expression into her of my anger, never, never again, the righteous chant accompanying the clasp. It happened very fast. Grab, crush, 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 release. And at the first extra force, she swung her head as if checking who this was and looked at me and saw me. Yes, this was her mom. Her mom was doing this. Her dark, deeply open eyes took me in. She knew me. In the shock of the moment, she learned me. This was her mother, one of the 2 whom she most loved, the 2 who loved her most. Near the source of love was this.
So, I hope what you see from that poem is how ordinary an act of abuse can be. You know, it's not only those horrific things that happen when children are being beaten severely or sexually abused or locked in a closet as a form of discipline. Child abuse needn't consist of an act that's considered a crime by law. Abuse can be cumulative, a series of small unkindnesses, of small belittlings, of small acts that cumulatively wear down the spirit of the child. This is the kind of abuse that's much, much more common, and it can be very subtle. But if we're serious about wanting to protect our children from abuse, we have to take this seriously. If we want to protect our children from abuse, we have to be aware of what it is that makes us act abusively. So that means knowing ourselves. That means understanding what it is that triggers us. You know, in psychology, they use the word trigger to talk about an event that occurs and your response to that event is way out of proportion to the event itself. So in the case of the poem, the child's about to push her brother over on his face again. Not a hugely harmful behavior, but not a good behavior either. And this mother, fed up and at the end of her rope, after all the things that she's described, grabs her and crushes her hand just a bit too hard. So in this case, she was triggered by her daughter starting to do something she'd apparently been doing repeatedly, that is to say, pushing her little brother over. Triggers can be all kinds of things. The main thing about it that's important is that whenever your behavior is out of proportion to the stimulus that causes it, then we call that a trigger. You have been triggered in some way. Now, where this gets really involved and common is when our triggers are also accompanied by a lack of understanding of child development. One of the most common reasons that children are mistreated is because the parent doesn't understand fully the developmental stage that the child is going through. I mean, nobody expects to be able to reason with an infant. We know, they just don't have reason. And yet, when they're just a little bit older, how many of us think, why, that child did that on purpose? They are purposely ignoring what I say. Now, the fact of the matter may be that the child is impulsive and has no self-control because they're a child. They're a little kid. They can't control themselves. They see something or an impulse occurs to them and they act on it. But to the parent may assume, I've told this child not to do that before. They're doing it on purpose. They're doing it to be defiant to me. So we ascribe reason to the child's behavior that really has nothing to do with the child, but it is in fact a projection of something within us. In other words, a way that we might behave in certain circumstances we're attributing to the child, or a way that we did behave in the past we're attributing to a child. Now, abuse is not only acts of commission. Abuse can also be acts of omission. Kids have lots of needs, and it can be exhausting trying to fill them all. Sometimes we're just too exhausted or not able to do it, and so we don't. And that's all right. But if it happens too much, then we get into kind of the silent type, of the hidden type of child abuse, which is child neglect, which also has really terrible consequences. So I think it's important that we understand that abuse is something that we can all fall prey to doing, to committing. It's not something that only those bad people that get arrested commit. It's something that all of us are capable of, and it's important to us. It's important for us to understand that. Assalamu alaikum.